All right, everybody. Today we figure out if our motor is good or if we just did a whole bunch of work for nothing. Hopefully the first one. How's it going, everybody? My name's Andrew, and this is the Make It and Break It YouTube channel. I'm currently sitting in the driver's seat here of our Doritos Locos RX-8 project car as some good vibes, because this is where I want to be sitting at the end of this episode, whenever that happens, with the engine running and everything okay. So, last couple episodes with this car, we've been prepping the engine for install, throwing it in, getting it mounted so that it's actually solidly in there and we can fix the rest of the parts to it. So right now, the engine's sitting in on motor mounts, transmission attached, hopefully correctly, and most of the hose is attached, mostly so I didn't leave any openings for more spiders to crawl into everything, because they're everywhere. It's kind of ridiculous at this point. But today we're gonna install the rest of the parts, components. We got some AC compressors, we got the starter. Our new starter needs to go in, all of our intakes and belts and everything, and we're gonna go try and turn this baby on. So I went out today and picked up some water, some distilled water, which is what you mix with your coolant mix. Anyway, getting a little bit later start, but I've not been feeling the greatest, so I've been trying to get a little bit of sleep and get into bed a little bit earlier than normal. So let's go start throwing stuff back on here. Ugh, hair's bad. Let's put on a hat for this. All right, one more day and the car mine's down. I just don't understand how I get this dirty. But our engine bay has a lot of stuff in it now. So we got all of our hoses hooked back up as far as I could tell. We got our new filter, K&N air filters in here. Got all of this stuff hooked back up. I didn't have any spare harness parts laying around, so I think I got it all. The belts are in and pretty tight. Hopefully not too tight, but so we're at the point where we got to start filling fluids. So one thing we're going to do beforehand is we're going to do one last check of fluids in the engine, because there's no reason to keep the old fluids that were in the engine that made the transition the entire way across the Pacific. So we're going to go down, pull the drain plug on the engine block anyway, for the oil and for the coolant, drain out anything that's left, and then we'll start filling up again. So we'll fill up with some coolant here. We got a bunch of water and then some coolant mix in that, some coolant mix in that box there. I originally bought that coolant mix for the 300C that's sitting out there, but I haven't got there that far on that project yet, so we're just gonna steal it for this one. And then back in the storage area, I've got like 10 liters of oil, so we'll see how much oil this thing actually takes. Supposedly an oil change is like 3.5 liters, 3.7 liters, something like that. But we did drain some oil out of the cooling system, the oil cooling system in here, and I think rumor has it that there's up to about 7 liters of oil in the cooling system total. So we'll see how much oil we actually have to add to get into the good range, and then we'll prime her and give her a start. All right, so we filled everything. I want to note that we're just short of full according to the oil dipstick right now. But we filled nearly like 4.5 liters, quarts, 4.5 quarts of oil into the oil pan. Whereas the manual says about 3.7 with an oil filter change. So there's some oil loss in the system. That's to be expected because we disconnected those oil cooler lines and lost some oil there. So we also filled up this coolant. There we go, coolant reservoir. We're gonna pop this open here just so we can get some suction out of that thing. And then we've disabled fuel like we would for a compression test. So we pulled the fuel relay and the fuel pump fuse. Those are sitting right here. We've also taken a few precautions here. So I've got 2 fire extinguishers on standby, one right over there and one in front of me here. Just in case something goes horrifically wrong with like the fuel or something like that. This first segment though, with the fuel lines pulled, we're just gonna essentially prime the system. So I have brand new, fully charged battery. It's been on a tender while this car has been, sitting up in the air. And so we're gonna crank it a few times to get the oil pump and everything else primed and going. And so then when that happens, maybe we'll get some coolant flowing out of here and we can refill with some of our pre-made 50/50 things here. So if that's the case, then we can fill it back up to the top and then get ready for our startup by replacing the fuel. So let's go crank it first and make sure everything looks okay-ish. All right, so we have power to the dash, which is good. So we connected that power up correctly at least. And we're gonna crank it here for a sec. I was not seeing any oil pressure, but we'll let it sit here for a sec, let the starter cool off. Sounds like the starter's working good, which is nice. And all the rest of our stuff is on at least here, so. Everything seems to be moving okay. So let's pull out our computer and check everything real quick and see if everything's working fine. So we put on the computer and it's not reading any codes. Which I find funny because we've disconnected a lot of the things that make this car go, which is a thing to remember. The codes are not there necessarily to tell you that your car isn't going to work. It just tells you the things the manufacturer thinks you'd want to know to make your car work. So there's a difference there. All right. So everything seems to be working there. Let's hook up everything and then see if we get this thing to fire up. We haven't seen any oil pressure yet. I'm gonna check that first and make sure that we're seeing everything we should correctly. All right, well, everything seemed to mostly be okay, but we're not gonna get a start tonight. So everything seems to be hooked up appropriately. There's a weird buzzing noise. I'm not sure if it's the starter or if it's a fuel pump or something in here, but there's a weird buzzing noise when we got the accessories turned on. But otherwise, everything seems to be hooked up correctly and well. And I don't see any coolant leaks and oil leaks from anything I was expecting, but there's one difference with this oil filler than our previous one, and I'll show you guys that. So, well, it's going to be hard to show you, but I'll show you here, and then I'll show you where the new part is on our old motor, which has its oil thing on. So, the oil filler neck on the RX-8 starts up here, where you saw this funnel, right? So, and then it runs underneath the intake manifold, and then down to the engine. And it goes right in through here. You see that yellow dipstick? Just right above the yellow dipstick. So my old engine had this vacuum hose, which this one still has up here. This one also has a second vacuum connection down at the base of it. And I'll show you where that is on our other engine. Hold on. So here's our oil filler neck, and it includes the vacuum chamber, so that's what this thing is. This is your oil filler neck going down. So this is that top connection right here. This is that top vacuum line that goes to your intake. Down here, there's nothing. But on the intake on that engine, there is a vacuum line coming off the back here. And so what I was down checking out spark plugs and everything and getting ready to set up for a fire up, and I noticed there was a small oil leak coming down the side of the block here. And I thought it might be this banjo bolt connection, but it wasn't, because the banjo bolt connection was clean and not oily. But I saw some pooling of oil on the Mazda symbol, actually. And that's how I noticed that there was some oil pooling there. I was looking at the Mazda symbol. And I was looking for other sources of oil, and the only other source of oil at that point is our filler neck. So I was looking around, and I pulled out my my handy dandy mirror, inspection mirror, I used in a previous life, and I saw an extra vacuum port right here at the bottom, and it had a little bit of oil just on the tip of it. So what was happening is, since we weren't getting really any intake air, we weren't pulling the vacuum on the intake during our cranking. There was a little bit of pressure in the crankcase, and we were actually ejecting oil out of that secondary vacuum line. So I'm gonna have to go cap that before I can truthfully get us up and running here, because I can't just have oil squirting out all over my engine. That's a good way to start a fire, or screw up everything about your engine. So we're gonna have to go get an oil cap or a vacuum cap for that connection before we can start up. But otherwise, we are doing really well, and I've hooked up all the spark plugs, brand new spark plugs, hooked everything up. I've got the battery on a tender again. You can see the lines running over there somewhere. And so we really are set up for startup tomorrow. So I'm gonna go to bed tonight, get some rest, because I want to get up early, get to the store, get some caps for the vacuum system there, and we'll get a startup first thing in the morning. So I'll see you guys in the morning. Alright, so it's the next day. We plugged our vacuum port there, and it's a moment of truth, I guess. See how it goes? It turns on. immediately, which is nice. Ooh, check engine lights. Let's see what that is. She lives, I think, mostly. At least she turns on and turns off and idles for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. So we wanted to get her up temperature just to make sure that there were no leaks going on. The only leak we had was coming out of the top of the reservoir here, which is kind of expected when you're running it open. We are getting some smoke from our exhaust flange back here, and that's coming up, and that was really weirding me out for a second, but it looks like it's just some grease or something cooking off the bolts that are on there, or maybe it's the gasket in there that's getting worn in or cooked in or whatever. So looks like we're fine there, and we're definitely getting... That was weird. We were definitely getting exhaust out the back, so we didn't have like this huge exhaust leak as far as I can tell. So looks like everything is relatively good to go. So what we're gonna do now is get this thing ready to actually go on the street. So we're gonna put the wheels back on, put the hood back on, let it cool down a little bit, check the coolant and check the oil here. And if all of that is good, then we're gonna take ourselves a little drive around to see how we're doing. And we're back. So still have a couple issues. We're getting a random misfire code, a P0300 or something like that, which is not ideal. That could be symptomatic of many things. From we didn't get our plugs connected up properly to our, wires or coils, or could be a fuel problem, or we could have a vacuum leak somewhere into our fuel system, which is causing us weird issues. So we got some stuff to run down there, and we also have that emissions system, which I'm not super worried about, but we'll probably look into it anyway. But she works, she runs, she drives. Fourth gear works again. Hooray, it's not a synchro problem, it was a engine mount problem. So that's pretty awesome, actually. Yeah, first engine swap successful. All right, everybody. That's it for today. We have our Mazda RX-8 running and driving. We got it back on the battery tender over there somewhere. Because there's some sort of voltage leak or something that just kills the battery on this thing. So brand new battery tender anyway. We have a running and driving car again. So now we have two cars that are sort of running. So if you like this video, definitely go hit like, comment down below. If you have some troubleshooting tips for the P0300, especially since we've got brand new coils, wires, and plugs in, I will definitely take those in the description or in the comments down below. If you like what you're seeing with this video and think, this RX-8 project or our motorcycle project, some 3D printing, and maybe we'll pick up that Chrysler 300C project again. If any of that sort of stuff sounds interesting, definitely subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you get notified when we put out a new video. And yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Again, my name's Andrew. This is Make It and Break It. Our Doritos Locos RX-8 runs again. We'll catch you guys later. Okay, everybody. Today we're gonna fill her up.